So I was defining legal literacy. Legal literacy is the legal side of what you're doing. You're doing the financial literacy side. And legal literacy is about educating people about how the legal system works. And in particular, what I'm trying to do is communicate about how it works when you're in being sued by a debt collector or credit card company. So some of the problems I've identified culturally are that there are a lack of comprehensive legal services for the population that I'm trying to reach. And the population that I'm trying to reach is the near poor, which is a new definition of what's happened to the middle class as they're slipping closer to the poverty level but are not quite in it. So they're not able to access the limited resources that are available for low-income populations, but they are having the same problems. So the lack of comprehensive legal services for the near poor, the middle class, and the professionals like you who come in contact with these populations who are having problems. And so you, as the professionals, I consider the first responders. You hear about the problems first before these people even get to the legal resources. And so what I want to do is educate you about the arc of what happens in a debt collection case, so you have identify the red flags when a client comes to you when you're volunteering in a situation and you hear somebody talking about the problems they're having with credit card companies and debt collectors. A recent report by the Empire Justice Center states that there are 2.3 million unrepresented New Yorkers going through the court system, in particular last year. That was the count for last year. I know that in New York there are between 300,000 and 500,000 people who are being sued for credit card debts, and of those, 90% of them never show up in court for a variety of reasons. Maybe they never receive notice, maybe they're too scared, maybe they're, they think they're judgment proof and nothing will impact them no matter what happens in court. Of the 10% who do show up, only 1% are represented by counsel. So you have a sense of what's going on in debt collection cases and how many people are unrepresented. So what usually happens is when a lawsuit is begun, most of these people who don't find out about the lawsuit until they either have a frozen bank account or their paycheck is about to be garnished or has already been garnished. And I did prepare a brochure about garnishment, all the details of what happens in a garnishment proceeding. And that has been submitted, and it will be available eventually for you on the Coalition website, possibly. But today I want to talk about what should happen. And what should happen is that a consumer who's being sued by a debt collector or credit card company should receive what's called legal process. And legal process is the notice that you're supposed to receive. It's a summons, which summons you to court, and a complaint, which details the debt collector or credit card company's claim against you. And once you receive the summons and complaint, and by the way, it does not tell you what to do next. When you get it, if you're just a defendant or a debtor, you have no idea from the piece of paper what you're supposed to do, other than it says, be sure to answer this document. So the law is that if somebody handed it to you in person, you have to get into court within 20 days. You have to answer the paper within 20 days. And an unrepresented defendant, the way they answer a paper is by going to court and saying, I got this, what do I do next? Or if it was mailed to you, tacked to your door, handed to somebody at your office and then turned over to you, you might have 30 days from the date that happens. Either way, you got to get to court. You get a piece of paper, you have to get to court. And so what I like to do is motivate people to, when they get legal process, when they find out there's a lawsuit against them, get proactive. Don't sit around and wait for the next step. Maybe you're on the phone negotiating with your debt collector, thinking that you're about to reach a settlement, and you get handed this piece of paper. Why should you bother? The case is about to settle. It's not about to settle. You're being sued. And this is what you need. This is information that I'm giving you so you can keep it in mind when you're dealing with people who are in trouble, and you can pass on the information. So I like to encourage defendants who are being sued to prepare to go to court. And the first thing they're going to do is get out a piece of, when they find out about the lawsuit, is get out a piece of paper and a pencil. It sounds very mundane and basic. Write down, how did you find out about this lawsuit? The date, the time, the weather, how tall you are, what color your hair is, how much you weigh, because these are all facts that the process server who served you with the papers have to make a note of themselves, and they have to file a legal paper called an affidavit of service. And that paper is going to be in the court's file, and you're going to get it, your clients are going to get a chance to look at that piece of paper, and they're going to want to have a tick list. What do they think happened and who got served? Was it their senile granny who they're taking care of, who lives in the apartment with them? Was she the one who was handed the piece of paper? Was it, like the kid you babysit for who's, 6 years old? Is that who answered the door and got the piece of paper? Like, you want to make note of that, because when you go to court, and I'll back up a little bit, I was sued. It's not a pretty experience. And even for somebody with a lot of, I had a lot of years under my belt as an attorney, and I went to court and I was a mess. And so I like to give people the suggestion that they get a narrative written, start from the minute you find out that there's a lawsuit. So you have a document that you've written that you can bring with you to compare to this affidavit of service. That's the first thing you do. Then, even before you get to court, the 20 days are running. You know you got to get to court, you got to do something, you might not know what it is. What you're going to do is go back and organize your records about your relationship with this particular creditor. So if Macy's is suing you, you know you had a credit card with Macy's, and you've been paying things regularly, you're surprised to find out that it's now in the hands of their collection department, or a credit card, a debt collector, because you thought you were paying everything on time. Go back, pull out your records. Do you have statements? Even if it's online, start bringing up your online account and look through the archive of your payment history. Look through your checking account and pull out your debit receipts and your, anything you use to pay off that account, and start putting together a narrative of your relationship with this creditor. At some point, you will have a chance to tell that story if you go to court. If you don't go to court, you lose out on that entire opportunity. But we're talking about the people who want to change the outcome by showing up in court, and so we want to motivate those clients to organize their records. And if you have no records, if everything got lost in a fire, you moved 6 times, there was a flood, whatever the reason, sit down and write down what you recall, what your recollection is of your relationship with this creditor. I've had this card for 15 years, I've never missed a payment, or I missed a payment, I lost a job, somebody got sick, we moved, I did miss 3 payments. Whatever the story is, get the story together and be able, and so that you know what the story is, because the clients who are going in on their own behalf are their best representative. They're their own best advocate. So I like to talk about who's on first. People get to court and they look around the courtroom and everybody there seems to be against them. The people at the front of the room, maybe there's a judge on the bench, maybe not when they first get into the courtroom, and then there's a lot of personnel all around where the judge is going to take a seat. So there might be a court officer, there might be a stenographer, there'll be what they call a part clerk, and then there'll be the bank's attorney, there might be an interpreter, and it all looks like, wow, they're all there for the bank, and then there's me. Well, that is not the case. And even if the bank's attorney is there all day handling 40 files and seems to be on a first name basis with the judge, the way it works is the court reporter, the court stenographer, is taking down every word that is said. And you are entitled as a debtor defendant to your day in court. And even if the bank's attorney and the judge belong to the same athletic club, political club, whatever, synagogue, church, whatever, in their roles in the court, they're officers of the court, and you are entitled to your day in court, to tell your story to a fair and impartial tribunal. So only the court employees work for the courts. The bank's attorney works for the bank or credit card. They are not an employee of the judge. They are not on the same side, and everybody's entitled to a fair and impartial tribunal. And I like to talk about the language. The courts have their own language. So a courtroom is called a court part. Where did that word come from? I have no idea. But it refers to what's happening in that particular courtroom in front of that particular judge. A calendar is not a calendar. It's a list of cases. And people will go in and be told, asked, are you on the calendar? What number are you on the calendar? And typically, the list of cases, referred to as the calendar, is posted outside the courtroom, the list of cases for a particular day, and people would be well advised to look up their case and know what number they are on the court's calendar. And then the phrase return date. Return date, a lot of these cases don't go beyond a first initial introduction of the consumer and the bank's attorney to the judge on the first date, and before you know it, you're out the door again. What do you do next? You have to know what's the date I'm supposed to come back. That is the return date. It will be said on the record by the judge, and if your clients missed it, make sure before they leave, say, excuse me, what is the return date? When do I come back? So that's all part of consumers advocating for themselves in these situations. And the best thing you can do as your own advocate is ask questions. And if you don't understand what's going on, you know, the wheels of justice turn pretty slowly, but they turn pretty quickly when you're in front of the judge and you want to gather all the details of what's going on, and before you know it, you don't even know what happened. So people should slow the process down and ask questions. And just by showing up, you've already slowed the process down, because if you're not there, the bank's attorney can get what they want ASAP. So I encourage people to show up, slow the process down, make sure to ask questions if you don't understand what's going on. Know who the court stenographer is. It'll be the person sitting in the corner typing, and speak so that the court stenographer gets all of your questions on the record, because you want it to be clear that you did not understand what was happening as it was happening, or you want it to be clear what did happen, in case you decide at some point you're going to take this case all the way to